Speculation alert, this video contains information about Alpha 20 that is subject to change and some aspects are purely speculative about how the developers may or may not proceed moving forward. Welcome to my first video in the 7 Days to Die Alpha 20 in-depth series, where I go over changes that are coming in Alpha 20 in depth and how I think they will change the game and then give my opinion on those changes. By the way, because we have very little gameplay available for Alpha 20, I'll be using my own modded gameplay in the background to keep things interesting. Links to those mods are of course in the description. Before I jump into the changes, let's give this video some context. The looting system is broken in 7 Days to Die Alpha 19, at least according to a large portion of the community. The changes that Alpha 19 brought to the looting mechanics, which massively nerfed loot and made looting generally more arbitrary, were met with mixed responses from the 7 Days to Die community. In fact, I would go as far as to say that while 7 Days to Die is technically at the best it's ever been, the community has never quite been so divided or disappointed by certain mechanics and choices like the loot rebalance. Some players feel the RPG part of the game is taking over the survival part of the game, which unfortunately for some is true in my opinion at least. The Fun Pimps are definitely taking this game more in a Fallout direction than a DayZ direction. We can see this with the outfit changes which have been pushed back to Alpha 21, introducing a much more character build and role-playing focused mechanic with 4 slots of clothing similar to Skyrim's apparel system in place of the old 10-slot fully customizable survival styled system. But fear not, survivalists, the Fun Pimps have heard your pleas and are introducing a change that I think will have a huge effect on this game, particularly for those survivalist players who want a sense of risk versus reward and logic to their looting, which the current looting system essentially doesn't provide, as you'll get the same loot in the end of dungeon chest whether you went through a house or a military base. So, are the Fun Pimps fixing the looting system by reverting it back to Alpha 18's mechanics? No. But they've had a better idea in my opinion. This is less of a feature and more of a series of changes which have a cascading effect on the game. The first of these changes is the Biome difficulty multipliers. In Alpha 20, we will see our Gamestage multiplied by a modifier which is biome dependent. If you're unaware of how looting works and how Gamestage affects it, I do have a video on it popping up on the top right. In Alpha 20, if you're in the desert, your Gamestage will be multiplied by 1.5, in the snow biome it will be multiplied by 2, and in the Wasteland Rework it will be multiplied by 3. I should say that those numbers are still subject to change. This means that you'll face zombies harder than you normally would, but you'll also get much better loot. So while this won't let you get a sniper rifle on day 1, which is probably for the best, you'll be able to go into the harder biomes in the late early to mid game around day 18 to 14 and get much better loot than you'd normally be able to if you're willing to fight harder zombies. Although apparently this won't affect the Blood Moon Horde difficulty, so anyone who wants to fight harder hordes will have to find another way. As a practical example of this new change, if you have a game stage of 35 in the forest biome, you'll be in loot tier 1, which will give you a small chance of basic firearms and equipment. However, if your game stage 35 character goes into the Wasteland, your game stage would be multiplied up to roughly 105. This would put you in the final loot tier 3. This is where the fun begins. In loot tier 3 you can start finding everything in the game: auto shotguns, M60s, sniper rifles, military armor, gyrocopter parts, crucibles, the list goes on, everything you'll want to get your paws on as soon as possible. But with that you'll have to face harder enemies while you're in the biome, along with the inherent difficulties associated with those biomes. In that same example I gave you, you would be facing basic enemies at game stage 35, the occasional feral spiders and the Hawaiians. But in the Wasteland you'd be game stage 105 and you'd be fighting much more hardcore zombies, like radiated zombies, much more frequent ferals, and maybe even cops. I have a feeling this isn't the exact change the community was necessarily hoping for, but it's a genius alternative in my opinion. The Fun Pimps keep their RPG style looting, but the people who play 7 Days to Die for the survival aspects will be appeased for now, as they have something close to a risk versus reward logical looting system. But you might be thinking one of two things. A, you didn't mention the burned forest biome, and B, the wasteland is shit. What if I don't want to go into a biome made of cinder blocks and puke green clouds splattered everywhere? Well, the next feature should help with that, introducing change 2. the Wasteland Rework. The burned forest biome has been deleted, and all of its assets have been merged into the Wastelands art set. This will allow for a much more diverse and unique variant of the Wasteland biome. The devs have also been hard at work creating new environmental stamps to liven up the terrain for the wasteland. One example that was given in a livestream in November is an impact crater from a presumably nuclear bomb, which will go hand in hand with the Alpha 20 map generator, which is seeing massive improvements. Now, instead of a puke green flat debris field, we'll see a much more reserved use of the debris terrain and a touch of red and grey into that spinach minefield, along with a lot more thematic terrain choices. Hey, it's not exactly an explosion of colour and life, but it is a wasteland after all. While I'm on the topic of minefields, the devs have also talked about thinning out the amount of landmines in the wasteland as a result of a much more interesting environmental hazard. Just before I jump into the last feature I'll be talking about in today's video, I just want to say that if you're enjoying the video, be sure to leave a like, and if you want to see more videos like this, then hit that subscribe button. I'll be covering more features on the road to Alpha 20 in the coming weeks, and of course when Alpha 20 comes out I'll be continuing my tutorialized content into Alpha 20. Anyway, let's get back to the video. Introducing Feature 3. Radiation. I should clarify that radiation may not make it into Alpha 20, and all of what I'm about to say may apply more so to Alpha 21 than Alpha 20. It still remains to be seen. Now, I'm not talking about the radiation we already have that acts as a world border to kill you if you go too far, but a much lower grade radiation that covers the entire wasteland biome. This will add a new challenge to the wasteland, similar to how the snow biome will freeze you and the desert will overheat you. The wasteland has areas which will irradiate you. The severity is apparently going to vary throughout the biome, with HUD indicators to tell you how irradiated the area you currently in is, and even talks of a Geiger counter. But what does that mean? Well, right now we don't officially know what radiation is going to do to the player. The fun pimps have not said. There are two competing community theories, one being that radiation will work similarly to how extreme radiation already works by dealing damage to the player over time. The second I've seen floating around is that it may work similarly to how it works in the older Fallout games. For those who haven't played those games, it would essentially work similarly to the infection, where you get more severe debuffs as exposure continues, likely ending in death. I would just like to clarify that those are just community theories. As far as I've seen, neither of them are endorsed by the fun pimps, and they are being very tight-lipped about the radiation mechanics, likely to temper expectations, as radiation mechanics may not make it into Alpha 20. And just to doubly clarify, I am not an employee or in any way affiliated with the fun pimps, and my speculation should not be taken as official information. So how would you avoid the radiation? Well, the short answer is you don't really avoid it, you just take it. Making a base in the wasteland early on will be a terrible idea, as radiation poisoning, whatever form that takes, will likely kill you if you stay longer than half a day, according to the devs in one of the developer livestreams from November. But later in the game there will apparently be equipment that can minimize or even eliminate radiation damage altogether. If radiation makes its way into Alpha 20, this will likely be the hazmat suit, which has been in the game for a very long time. But in Alpha 21, we'll be getting the Nomad armor. Ooh, thumbnail. I wasn't able to find out if the hazmat suit is going to survive into the Alpha 21 character and outfit overhaul, but the Nomad armor's original concept says it provides radiation protection along with all of its other benefits. But that isn't final and is being pushed back to Alpha 21. However, there are going to be some options to prevent radiation damage earlier on in the game. The devs have said they're working on candy and or drugs which will prevent radiation damage and presumably other drugs to cure it. Think Rad-X and Rad-Away for anyone who has played Fallout. And while I haven't found anything pointing towards it, I wouldn't be surprised if some perks are updated to give passive rad resist. Pain tolerance, healing factor, and well insulated in the fortitude tree would all be a reasonable place to put a radiation protection buff, but like I said, that's just my speculation. So what does this all mean for 7 Days to Die? Well, ultimately that does remain to be seen. This video was obviously made before 7 Days to Die Alpha 20 was released, so there is still room for the mechanics to change, or for the fun pimps to utterly botch the mechanics entirely. But assuming everything goes as I've said in today's video, this could massively change the mid game and end game for 7 Days to Die, especially the mid game. Now, instead of just spending week 2 doing trader quests for rewards and loot, you'll have the option to put your life on the line by heading into one of the more dangerous biomes to try your luck with the harder zombies. I especially like that we're getting varying levels of risk versus reward. Either way, players will now have a strong element of meaningful choice in their playthroughs with regards to the sandbox, and choice is something that survivalists and RPG players will both want. So I think this change is going to make a large part of the community much happier with the state of the game. By no means is this going to solve 7 Days to Die's loot issue. Many players simply feel that if they open a gun safe, they should get a gun. And you can hardly follow that survivalist logic there, but the fun pimps seem more focused on RPG elements for 7 Days to Die, prioritizing a Skyrim or Fallout loot system of scaled loot tables rather than the more classical logical survival loot system like DayZ or Rust. It was of course inevitable that at some point in 7 Days to Die's development, the developers would have to decide if this game was a survival game with RPG elements or an RPG with survival elements, and it seems that given the devs have doubled down on the latter with the upcoming update, given that they have chosen not to roll back the looting system and are intending to add much more RPG mechanics in future, such as the aforementioned character overhaul. But what about you? Do you prefer the linear RPG loot progression, or are you more of a risk versus reward survivalist? Are you happy about this compromise? Do you think it was unnecessary? Is it enough? Let us know down in the comments. But with that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.